I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. This is going to be a fun show, and it's going to be a different show from our normal show. President Biden is in Air Force One right now, and he's heading to Portland. We expect him to land sometime in the next half hour or so, and we're going to cover that live. It is definitely our big story. This is our live camera out at the airport. Air Force One will land here in just a bit. Our crews on the scene are ready to tell us what's happening when it happens. We'll come back to this shot every once in a while. Not much to show you at the moment. In the meantime, the reason for this visit is to raise a bit of money for Democrats and to help Democrat Tina Kotek's campaign. She's in a super tight race for governor, with recent polls showing that she's actually behind the Republican Christine Drazan. I spoke with political science professor Jim Moore about the visit. He reminded me this has happened before.
Well, it's a real interesting event. You know, we saw the same thing 12 years ago. John Kitzhaber was running for a third term as governor. It was an extremely close race, the closest race we've had in decades, eventually. And Barack Obama came to town and got the troops ready to go. They actually didn't raise that much money, but it was more important to get people enthused. And I think that's what Biden's visit is doing here, and what Kotek wants it to do here. You know, what his presence does, it says it's not just about Oregon issues, it's a nationally important election. And that will get the Democrats going who are there. And then if Tina Kotek turns it into commercials, it might get the broader family of Democrats to be really enthused about voting and turn out at a higher rate.
Well, we'll be watching to see if that happens. It's interesting to note that Oregon Governor Kate Brown, also a Democrat, will not be there to greet the president. She's on a trade trip to Asia. Although maybe it's not that surprising. She has one of the lowest approval ratings in the country for a governor, and she's going to be out of office at the end of the year. So on a political front, there's not a lot that she can offer. And what do we, you and I, get out of this trip from the president? Professor Moore says nothing.
No, unless the president is, doing something, signing some kind of bill. For instance, just a day ago, he went to Colorado and created a national monument. He's not going to do anything like that here. So no, we don't get anything out of it, but it is important because I got to tell you, when you get to the Midwest and the East Coast, they kind of forget the West Coast is here. And especially Oregon, Washington, Bill Gates, Microsoft, and Boeing and California, everything going on there. Oregon, occasionally a sporting event. We just aren't on the radar. So it shows the rest of the world that we're here because that national attention follows, especially the president.
And I know a lot of you have told me in the past that you really like it when the president comes. So we want to hear all of your thoughts on this. Do you agree the public gets nothing out of this, or do you like to see the president come to the West Coast just to acknowledge that we still exist? Let us know. You can send an email to thestory@kgw.com or leave us a voicemail, 503-226-5090. And while we're talking about politics tonight, we continue with our fact checks on political attack ads. This one is focused on Democrat Tina Kotek, who's running for governor. This is the newest ad to hit the airwaves. It has kind of an eerie blue-green sort of background. It's paid for by her rival, Republican Christine Drazan. As we get into this, I just want to remind you, I'm not on anyone's political team here. I'm not trying to help the Democrats or the Republicans or the non-affiliated candidates. I'm here to pull apart the ads to help you see which statements are true or false. Ready? Here we go.
Her way or the highway? Tina Kotek stood with Defund the Police extremists.
The reference on the screen refers to the AFT. That's the American Federation of Teachers. It's a nationwide union for teachers, and if you take a look there, they did endorse Kotek. It's right there on her campaign page. I looked really hard, but I could not find any statement from them calling for the defunding of the police. In 2020, the group did put out this proclamation saying that police should be demilitarized and reformed and should be taken out of schools and replaced with security personnel trained in peaceful solutions. The statement also says the group will support community allies, including Black Lives Matter. And Black Lives Matter certainly does support defunding the police and did in 2020. But I gotta say, that is an amazing stretch. Did AFT explicitly call for defunding the police? No, they did not. Not that I could find. As far as I can tell, that statement is false. Let's watch the next part.
She legalized tent cities.
Well, not exactly. The ad refers to HB 3115. That's the number of a bill that Kotek sponsored and helped push through the legislature. That did make it harder for cities and counties to crack down on homeless campers. It required that their action be objectively reasonable, and it did not really define what objectively reasonable means. The bill also allows homeless campers the right to sue to force the government to prove that standard. So yes, it is accurate to say that she sponsored that bill, but no, it did not legalize tent cities. But it did make it harder for cities and counties to regulate homeless campers. That claim, misleading at best.
And voted with Kate Brown to let murderers and rapists out of prison early.
All right, this line refers to another bill, SB 1008, that made its way through the 2019 Oregon legislature. It changed part of Oregon's strict sentencing guidelines for violent crimes called Measure 11. The bill stopped teenagers aged 15, 16, and 17 from being automatically waived into adult court when charged with serious violent crimes. It also prohibited them from being sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And it required a conditional release hearing halfway into their prison term for those who committed their crimes when they were teens. Finally, the law was not retroactive, but later Governor Brown did use her executive authority to commute the sentence of 75 people statewide who fell within the new parameters of the law and would have been covered if it was retroactive. Well, that move infuriated a lot of folks, including some in Marion County. The county put out this statement noting that it affected 17 people in Marion County, 8 convicted of aggravated murder or attempted murder, and 8 convicted of sodomy or rape. But before we get too far down this rabbit hole, let's get back to the statement. Did Kotek vote with Kate Brown to let murderers and rapists out of prison early? No, she did not. Here's another part.
Kotek has run government her way for a decade.
No, she's actually been Speaker of the House for 9 years, from January 2013 until January 2022, when she stepped down to run for governor. I don't know why they said a decade. Maybe they like decade because it worked well with her way. I don't know. Yes, it's been a while that she's been Speaker of the House, which does have enormous power, but it's 9 years, not 10, and it's actually more accurate to say she helped shape government.
Kotek even blocked an investigation into rampant sexual harassment because she didn't think it was her problem.
All right, fact-checking this statement is going to take us down kind of a winding road, but stay with me, we'll get there. The statement cites a KGW report from August 3rd of 2018, and let me just say, we have no control over whether a campaign grabs a story like that we've done. We certainly don't encourage it, but we can't stop it either. So let's take a look at that story. The headliner says Bueller, a Republican who was running for governor at the time, calls for Oregon House Speaker Kotek and Senate President Peter Courtney to step down. By the way, I did cover part of this issue back in 2018, but I did not write this story. It came from a reporter at the Statesman Journal. And it does state that Avakian, that's Labor Commissioner Brad Avakian, a Democrat, Avakian also says Senate President Peter Courtney and House Speaker Tina Kotek blocked his office's attempt to help some of the women who complained. Now, I wanted to look more deeply into all that, so I dug up the complaint that the Labor Commissioner filed back in 2018. This involves sexual harassment allegations within the state capitol by then Senator Jeff Cruz and others. The document points out that Kotek and Courtney were co-chairs of the Legislative Administration Committee, which includes personnel administration. It states that the committee's lawyer cautioned those making harassment allegations to kind of keep it quiet. The document also charges that on May 15th, the Labor Commissioner's office asked the Administration Committee to forward a letter from Avakian to 3 people who had alleged sexual harassment to tell them about their legal rights. It states that they initially agreed, but then later refused to forward that letter. It also points out the administration's committee sent their own letter to those individuals, but not until June 8th, when some of the statute of limitations were filed had expired. In that KGW story, by the way, Courtney and Kotek denied blocking any investigations. Kotek focused on the complaints against former Senator Cruz and then pointed out that she had no authority on the Senate side, which is true for the Speaker of the House. So, okay, I told you, that is a crazy, twisted path to follow, and I'm sorry if I lost you. It's all right. The statement was that Kotek blocked an investigation into rampant sexual harassment because she did not think it was her problem. Did she block the investigation? Well, there never was a resolution to that question. It's fair to say she was accused of blocking it, by a high-level government official in her same party, but that is not the same as actually blocking it. So I think we have to say that statement is misleading. After examining this entire ad, I think it's clear that most of the ad is false. Did she stand with a group that wants to defund police? No. Has she run state government for a decade? No. Did she legalize tent cities? No. Did she vote with Kate Brown to let murderers and rapists out of prison early? No. And by the way, Kate Brown's not voting, she's the governor. So there you have it, an attack ad against Democrat Tina Kotek that is mostly false. It's certainly not the only one of its kind running on your TV or screens, and I hope you watch all of them with a skeptical eye. Let's take another look out at the airport as we wait for Air Force One to come visible in the skies tonight. Might not see it till it's kind of close with all the smoke that's in the air. While we wait, we'll take a look at some past presidential visits to Oregon. And for that, we're going to head into the KGW Vault. Now, we don't have video of this one, but the very first sitting president to visit the Beaver State was Rutherford B. Hayes way back in 1880. The first presidential visit that we do have video of is September of 1963. The nation's 35th president, JFK, was in town. Oregon was one stop on his 11-state conservation tour. Here he was giving a speech in Clatsop County. It was actually JFK's only stop in Oregon as president. He campaigned here several times in years prior. Just 2 months after this speech, JFK was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. This is September of 1964 when President Lyndon B. Johnson traveled to Portland. After leaving the airport, onlookers lined the streets as the president and his motorcade made its way to the Sheraton Hotel. During Johnson's visit, he gave a speech on conservation and the value of public and private cooperation to provide power to the American people. Now let's jump a decade ahead over to 1975 when the 38th president, Gerald Ford, came to town. He spoke at a Republican fundraising dinner and made a speech to the area kids at the Youth Bicentennial Rally. Ford is in second place. All right, and we're going to move now to our live camera. Here is Air Force One as it makes its approach now to PDX. President Biden on board. And you would typically expect lots of dignitaries to be out to meet the plane and gathered to say hello to the president. But again, Governor Kate Brown is on her way to Asia. Some of the other candidates in Democratic races that we've talked to were not quite sure that they were going to even make it out to the tarmac, which kind of gives you an idea of the interesting politics going on with all this. By the way, this is a 747-200. It's a Boeing. It allows aerial refueling, 757, I'm told. Okay. Has a crew of 26, can fly about 7,600 miles, has a ceiling of 45,000 feet. David?
Pat, we're jumping in here. David Molko and I, Laurel Porter, are here with you as we watch Air Force One land at PDX at the Air National Guard base. And David, you did a little research that this is the smaller aircraft that the president sometimes uses, the 757.
Right. So this is a little different from 6 months ago. The president brought his little plane this time. He came up from John Wayne Airport in Orange County, which is my home airport where I grew up. It has a short runway, about 5,000 feet. So he's been going to Colorado, making stops in California. And so right now, this is actually the call sign. Yes, you're right, is still Air Force One, but this is the little plane. It's about the same as a Boeing 757. It's called a C-32 in military speak. 45 passengers, 16 crew. This is the plane you might see Vice President Kamala Harris on, or First Lady Dr. Jill Biden. Not typically the president, but in this case, here he is. And you know what? There are so many ways, it's not just the plane, guys, that this particular visit is so different from 6 months ago in April.
Oh, it really is, right? When he was here in April, he was talking about the bipartisan infrastructure package and what it was going to mean for Oregon, $1.2 billion in projects. And it was a very quick trip. It was only 4 hours. And now he's going to be here tonight. He's going to be staying overnight downtown, and he's going to be here tomorrow trying to help Tina Kotek, Democrat Tina Kotek in the governor's race, get an edge in this razor-thin race between she and the Republican Christine Drazan.
I mean, make no mistake, this is a political visit. If you just look at some of the polls that we've seen over the last few weeks, let me go back 3 weeks ago. So take it with a grain of salt, right? A poll that came out 3 weeks ago, DHM. Christine Drazan, 32%, Tina Kotek, 31%. That is within the margin of error. Betsy Johnson, 18%, undecided, 15%. Fast forward a week, so 2 weeks ago, an Emerson poll, Drazan 36, Kotek 34, again, margin of error, undecided 9%. I've been talking to some of our political analysts here, Rebecca Tweed, who deals with Republican campaigns, and she says she actually expects the number of undecided voters to go up in this critical period when the ballots are about to drop. So again, the president's timing here.
And ballots are dropping next week. And also, it's such a pivotal moment in Oregon's election because also we have the last debate between the governor's candidates next Wednesday here on KGW. So this is really important, an important time that the president has decided to come help Tina Kotek. They don't want to lose the governorship for the first time in 40 years in Oregon.
Absolutely.
Because the West Coast, all Democratic governors right now in Washington, Oregon, and California, often a triumvirate on issues like health care and the environment. So they want to do everything they can, the White House and Democrats, to keep Tina Kotek there. But Drazen's saying it just shows that Democrats are in a panic mode.
Well, and it's interesting, too, that the president, while he is popular within some of the Democratic base, he's not all that popular. And so some of them have had to make the calculus of, do they want to be seen with the president where he's talking about inflation and we're all thinking about gas prices here. I spent $75 the other day to fill my gas tank. And so we'll see who's going to be here. That's one of the interesting things, I think, is to see who greets the plane.
And who's not there, right? Will Tina Kotek be on the tarmac? Because obviously some sort of conversation between her campaign and the White House and Biden's advisors, the president's advisors, happened saying, hey, we need you in Oregon right at this moment in time. So is Tina Kotek going to be on the tarmac? We won't see the governor, as you mentioned. So will it be sort of her number two, Secretary of State Shemia Fagan, as the plane taxis?
We'll be keeping an eye on the tarmac here to see who the dignitaries are greeting the president.
I should mention, too, and this is kind of an interesting thing, you know, the president's approval rating numbers are actually coming up. They were at their lowest in July, and that's among both parties, which is interesting to see. Even with inflation still, we had that reading, I think it was Wednesday, core inflation, if you strip out gasoline, if you strip out food prices, with their volatile, it was the worst, again, a new 40-year high. But the president's approval ratings are actually coming up. We have this sort of moment of this critical moment, as you mentioned, with the ballot drop just coming in days away. So here we go on the timing again. It looks like we just changed the shot here. It's the Secret Service on the tarmac there.
Oh, yeah. And this is just, from having been out there in April, this is just a small slice of the folks that are there. They bring a small army in. There's armored limos waiting to take the president away. And it is nice that we're able to get at least a single camera out there. But security is always very tight. There are rings of security that you have to go through. They bring through bomb sniffing dogs and all sorts of things. So you can see the plane taxiing over, and the camera is facing out from the military side of PDX because we're a National Air Guard base. We've got the fighter wing there, and they are across from the terminal where you catch your Horizon planes.
And you both were covering that out at the Air National Guard base last April. Our Alma McCarty is out there for us tonight. Let's check in with Alma to get her view of things and what you're seeing, Alma.
Hey, good evening, guys. Yes, we're seeing Air Force One, as you can see, taxiing down the tarmac. You guys were talking earlier about the dignitaries who are out here. From my vantage point, the folks that I see are Senator Merkley, Jeff Merkley, and Representative Suzanne Bonamici. They are both here, expected, I'm sure, to greet the president when he gets off of Air Force One. This is the second time the president is in the Rose City within a 6-month period. The last trip was, of course, a lot shorter, and there were many more people because he stayed for a while at the airport at PDX. But the crowd at this point is limited pretty much to Secret Service, to the Air National Guard, and to the media as well. And I'll keep my eye out for any other dignitaries that are going to be here, but that is basically what I am seeing at this point.
And we should say
and in terms of the schedule, we do want.
I was just going to add, Alma, just a little bit about Senator Merkley being there, that Joe Biden was here as vice president in 2014, campaigning for Senator Merkley, who was running for re-election, his first re-election campaign against Dr. Monica Webby. So I gave him a little edge there in 2014. So not surprising to see Senator Merkley out there to greet the president.
I mean, and in this moment where we're 3.5 weeks out from the midterm election, although this is definitely a campaign visit, we also have to give the president credit where credit is due, because there's a lot that's happened in the last 6 months in terms of big bills that have been passed. You have the CHIPS Act in terms of microchips, that gun safety bill, which was the first, bipartisan federal legislation in, I think, 30 years there. The Inflation Reduction Act. Now, we can talk to the experts about whether they think that's actually going to bring inflation down, but that addressed, prescription drug costs, investments in energy and climate. So whether or not you agree with the president's policies and Democrats' policies as he makes this visit, and, let's face it, the referendum, the midterms in a large way are a referendum on the president and what he's done over the past 2 years. He has accomplished a lot in the last 6 months, if you talk to people on both sides of the spectrum here.
And Alma said, she talked to a White House official earlier who said that he'll be talking about that Inflation Reduction Act and the importance of it tomorrow in his speech, saying that the Republicans want, if they take majorities, to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. But this is always an impressive sight, isn't it, Pat,
absolutely.
to see Air Force One there at PDX.
And I know, David, that he was at your home airport, John Wayne, earlier today. And when he went to give a speech at the community college in California, was greeted by a number of Iranian protesters who were not necessarily protesting him, but protesting what's going on over in Iran. And he was saying that we stand with the citizens and the brave women of Iran. So it's interesting that, no matter where he goes, geopolitical issues follow him.
And Air Force One, really a symbol of the United States wherever the president goes. Whatever plane he's on is Air Force One, and that view you see right there is a powerful symbol throughout the world. Talking about people protesting or making statements when the president is here. The two other candidates in that hot race for governor tweeted. They took their shots at him being here, and we have a tweet. We may get to this as we wait for the president to disembark. Unaffiliated candidate Betsy Johnson took the opportunity to take a shot at opponent Tina Kotek and tweeted a welcome to the president in a video and said she hoped Biden comes often because every time he's here, Tina's tent cities get cleaned up a little bit. That was from Betsy Johnson. And then from Christine Drazen, she tweeted, while you're here, could you please, this was also from Betsy, could you please have a chat with Tina and other local officials, especially our Multnomah County DA Mike Schmidt, about prosecuting people that are breaking the law and actually holding criminals accountable. That again from Betsy Johnson.
And as we watch these staircases be wheeled up to the aircraft there, imagine the president's suite is not at the very front, it's sort of in the front middle of this aircraft, and then the media, of course, in the back, the pool media there. Just talking a little bit about the president's schedule here when he's going to be on the ground. He's going to head straight this evening to southeast Portland. The White House hasn't officially announced the location, but Secret Service has been screening folks outside the Service Employees International Union building on 26 and Powell there. He's going to participate in a grassroots volunteer event with Oregon Democrats there. Tomorrow, it's in East Portland at Portland Community Center. At noon, the president will make remarks on lowering costs for Americans. He's just directed the government to look at ways that they can lower prescription drug costs moving forward. That's noon. 1:45, a reception with Tina Kotek. I have to tell you, I've been looking on her webpage, and it's very clearly a fundraiser, guys, because Pat, I'm sure you have an opinion here. She was offering $10,000 was the price tag for you and a guest to take a photo with the president, $6,000 for one.
Wow. Well, I wish I had $10,000 for a photo. That would be nice. With whoever it is.
Stand on the line
Yes.
with the president as we watch the president prepare to disembark from Air Force One. It seems like they're running ahead of schedule. They weren't scheduled to be here till about 6:30, right?
Yeah, well, we're getting there. He's not on the tarmac yet, but I did want to say, not that I'm going to support Betsy Johnson, but we did have a photographer over on the east side where he's going to talk, and it's beautiful. It's all cleaned up. And 2 or 3 blocks away, there's all kinds of homeless camps that have not been touched.
And we saw that last time he was here, right, in
Absolutely.
April along Marine Drive.
Beautifying the city, or at least the parts the president will see.
Yeah, and the visit here, less than 24 hours. Wheels up tomorrow for Delaware, scheduled for about 2:50 in the afternoon, so the traffic impacts will sort of slow down after that as we await the president to come down out of Air Force One. And the question, as we've all been talking about here, I should say, David Molko here along with Laurel Porter and Pat Doris, if you're just joining us for this special coverage here, live pictures from Portland Air National Guard Base at PDX, watching Air Force One on the tarmac. with the president, President Biden, about to come down the steps is who will be there at the bottom of the steps and who won't be.
And we're hearing, I haven't heard that Tina Kotek's there, but we are hearing that the 1st District Congresswoman, Suzanne Bonamici, is there. And also, as Alma mentioned earlier, Senator Jeff Merkley is there. So those are the 2 dignitaries that we know of that are waiting there at the bottom of the steps for the president.
That's Bonamici in the dark suit and Merkley to her left, I believe.
And it sounds like Tina Kotek, from what we're hearing, has been spotted in Southeast Portland at the SEIU building, awaiting the president there.
And as we wait, maybe I can get in this tweet from Christine Drazen, the Republican candidate. And she said, Oregonians are tired of status quo politicians like Tina Kotek and Kate Brown, who've made life worse for families across the state. Bringing in a failed president isn't going to save a failing candidate. Our new direction begins on November 8th. She said. That was a tweet from Christine Drazen. So you can see this is a really competitive, sometimes, pretty tense.
The sharp elbows are out.
Sharp elbows, right.
And then talking to Len Bergstein, our political analyst here, I mean, we were sort of throwing around, why is the president coming to what, in his words, was a reliably blue state? And what Len said is, well, in terms of this race, in terms of the governor's race, not so reliable anymore. And that is why we have the president here.
And there he is, President Joe Biden, descending the steps to be greeted by Oregon's dignitaries. Suddenly we become a battleground state here.
At least for this race.
Well, and for some of the congressional races as well.
Right.
Things that like the 6th district, which they thought maybe was pretty comfortably Democratic, the pollsters and all that are now saying, well, kind of a toss-up.
Between Mike Erickson and Andrea Salinas, Erickson being the Republican, Salinas is the Democrat.
Correct, yes.
And Cook Political Report, also the 5th District, Jamie McLeod Skinner, Lori Chavez DeRemer also marked a toss-up. So both those districts are close and both could potentially go red, depending on what happens, again, in just 3.5 weeks here. And
interesting, when the president was here in April, a couple of days later, he endorsed Kurt Schrader in the 5th Congressional District. And as you know, Kurt Schrader lost in the primary, the first incumbent to lose in a primary in Oregon in, I think, 42 years. Jamie McLeod Skinner now representing the Democratic Party in the 5th against Lori Chavez DeRemer.
It's hard to see who the president's actually talking to here, but we did see, Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici, Senator Jeff Merkley. In the back there, you can see the presidential limousine, known unofficially as the Beast back there, which travels separately from the president, so that would have been on the ground hours, if not days ahead of his arrival. I did see Senator Merkley there kind of poking out behind the military officer there.
And David, I know you were out last April when he was in town, and so was I. And it was remarkable to me how big that airplane is. I mean, I know he brought the little one. He brought the compact version. And one of these days, he'll probably fly in on an electric one. But it is pretty majestic to see Air Force One, no matter what its size is, out on a Portland runway.
And we don't get a lot of visits here in Oregon. We have had 2 from Joe Biden this year, but before that, it was 2015 when President Obama was here twice, once to visit
You sound like
Intel.
a parent. Why don't you ever visit? Why don't you
Why don't you come to Oregon?
And
Right.
instead, here, if you look at the small picture on the left side of your screen, that is southbound I-205 coming out of the airport or near PDX, which is obviously being shut down in preparation for the president's motorcade as he makes his way here from the airport, the Air National Guard base, down to Southeast Portland there. Looks like he's got some notes or handing something over there. I'm not quite sure what that is, but
maybe he's asking for that gentleman's autograph.
That's what it looks like, doesn't it?
It's the bill to gas up the plane.
Can you imagine what that bill is?
I mean, it can't be a customs form because, 1, it's not an international flight, and 2, I don't think the president has to sign those.
No, probably not.
So from here, the president will join that motorcade. They're clearing the way there on 205 for the president to make his way to Southeast Portland to the SEIU Union headquarters at 26th and Powell, where he will be greeted. We hear that Tina Kotek will be there along with some grassroots Democrat volunteers. The president will talk with them, and then he will be overnighting in downtown Portland. The White House not confirming where that is, but our Catherine Cook has been downtown where the roads are all blocked off around Dunaway Hotel. So you can make your own guess there.
And that is Jeff Merkley that he's talking to in the red shirt there. That's one of our 2 U.S. senators.
I just have to remark here, in terms of what we've seen from the president on the road or on the campaign trail and what we saw 6 months ago, this is a pretty low-key arrival ceremony. I mean, there's a few of our, Oregon's elected leaders there to greet him. And that's kind of it, which is almost surprising to me, right? Who's there? Who's staying away? Which is a sort of recurring theme that we've been talking about here. I just want to bring it back to kind of where we are in Oregon and Portland and so on and so forth. As the president is here, we talk about the context of his visit. And again, we're going to run through some sort of recent polling, but take these with a grain of salt because things change, right? Overall, Oregon, DHM poll 3 weeks ago, only 25% of Oregonians polled said the state was going in the right direction. You zero in on the city of Portland. Only 13% of Portland voters surveyed said the city was headed in the right direction. That's a new poll that just came out yesterday. Again, DHM Oregonian. Take it to the Tri-County area, Multnomah, Washington, Clackamas. Only 9% say the Portland area is headed in the right direction. So that is the background of the president's visit and obviously trying to pull votes toward Tina Kotek with Betsy Johnson here. And Pat and Laurel, please chime in here. In a lot of ways, possibly the spoiler here for this election.
I think you're right. And it's going to be fascinating to see where this all goes. But I do want to get back to the earlier point you made, David, about it's stunning who's not here. Think about it. This is the leader of your party. This is the shining superstar. And you're running for election in 3 weeks and you don't show up to make sure that everybody sees that you're with this person? That really is a loud statement to me.
And the president's making the focus of his speech on inflation, which I think Republican candidates may be happy about because they're trying to really put the focus on inflation. They blame the Republicans for what we're seeing with the high cost of gas and groceries. The president tomorrow expected to talk about how the Inflation Reduction Act is going to help and bring down prescription drug costs and what he wants to do to try to lower costs for American families. But Republican candidates probably don't mind that focus on inflation.
Want to point the finger right at the Democratic Party and say, you're in control, it's all you.
All right, a little bit of a delay here as we switch between those cameras. They're not exactly timed perfectly, but you see Senator Merkley there, and it looks like Congresswoman Bonamici there.
That is, yep.
Potentially riding along with the president. Looks like they're on the left side of the beast there as the door opens. They never reveal exactly how thick those windows are, those doors are, but, there's sort of been urban legends about, the doors are a foot thick and the windows are certainly bulletproof. But, when the president's here, and it's not just that vehicle, right? There's going to be other vehicles and police and Secret Service. And so it is a huge undertaking, despite what we're seeing in this small welcome, in this snapshot, in this camera view. It's a huge undertaking for the president to be on the ground here or anywhere.
And it does look like Senator Merkley and the Congresswoman are getting a ride in the beast, as you call it.
Well, and if you're waiting for a loved one who's going to come south on 205...
Wouldn't you hate to be stuck in that traffic jam?
Be prepared to be kind because they're going to be very frustrated.
If there's any good news, Howard, our Chris McGinnis is standing by in a little bit. We'll check in with him on these traffic impacts over the next kind of 24 hours here. If there's any good news, at least he's inbound to the city, not sort of contributing to that outbound Friday afternoon rush. And I should mention, we didn't have much warning of this visit. When I say that, I think it was about a week and a half. As opposed to, I think, back in April, it seemed like we knew he was coming a long time in advance.
And if people missed earlier during the story, Pat, you were talking about Kate Brown not being here to greet the president. And the reason that her office gave was because she is on a trip. She left today to go to Asia, to Japan and South Korea. They said that trip was planned long before they found out the president was coming, as we watch the motorcade, his car leave PDX, headed for I-205. But so that is why Kate Brown is not there, as her office says, right?
Yeah, that's the excuse. I'm sure she could have changed that by a day if she wanted to. Hey, Kyle Aboshi is out where we believe the president is headed. Let's check in with Kyle and see how things are looking there.
Pat, we've got about 100 supporters and union members here at SEIU 49 Union Hall in Southeast Portland, anxiously awaiting the president's arrival. Behind me, you can see the building itself. It's that purple and mustard-colored building. You can also see the dump trucks and police presence along with Secret Service. We've had a Coast Guard helicopter flying overhead a short time ago. I should also mention that gubernatorial candidate Tina Kotek is on scene as well to greet the president. We are told this is going to be a grassroots volunteer event with Oregon Democrats. Now, what that means, we're not quite sure. They haven't disclosed whether that's making phone calls, just rallying supporters. We're not sure. But again, the president is expected to make his way here momentarily. It is always interesting as well to see what kind of reaction there is from folks who live around here or maybe walking nearby. This was not publicly disclosed that this event would be in Southeast Portland, just right across the street, literally from Cleveland High School and across the street from Powell Park. And we've seen people out playing basketball and the merry-go-round, just kind of enjoying themselves, people out walking the dog, not realizing indeed the president is on his way. Additionally, oftentimes we'll see people lined up, oftentimes to cheer or sometimes even to protest a president's arrival. In this case, the streets are clear. We anticipate the streets to be closed off here shortly as the motorcade heads here towards SEIU 49 Union Hall. Again, about 100 people inside, many union leaders who we've seen. No real dignitaries that I could see just from across the street, although, as I mentioned before, Democratic gubernatorial candidate Tina Kotek is inside and will likely be waiting for him. Obviously, SEIU, the state's largest labor union, has an important presence in Oregon politics and has put an unprecedented amount of money behind Kotek. So good reason why the president will be coming here.
And Kyle, we'll check back with you as the motorcade approaches you there at SEIU at 26th and Powell in just a few minutes. But we want to talk more about the traffic impacts. You were talking, Pat, about just imagine being stuck there on the I-205. Chris, catch us up. Chris McGinnis here now to give us more on the traffic.
So I think you guys brought up a really good point. At least he is inbound, right, on this Friday evening. Here's a quick look at I-5. And why am I showing you this? Well, because ODOT actually turns off the cameras for the traffic reporters here. This is I-205. I-84 out near 82nd Avenue. So it's still feasible that the president follows I-205 to 84 or continues on I-205. But we do have a different vantage point here that I can show you. Hopefully I can bring this up. Behind door number 3 is a shot that we've got set up on the I-205 overpass, or excuse me, I should say the Halsey overpass on I-205. And you can see that the southbound part of the freeway has been cleared, and that's what they do during these presidential motorcades on the freeway. They get everybody off the freeway following the direction that the motorcade will be going, presumably here southbound on I-205. So this section of the freeway will be closed until the president gets on through. Where he goes from here, probably Powell Boulevard, not 100% sure, but you can see that some of Portland police are out there on the exits monitoring. I-205 is now basically blocked off, right? Southbound from Airport Way all the way down to presumably Powell, where the president will then make that trek into Southeast Portland. Another impact about this presidential visit that is very impactful to a lot of people, the TriMet impact. All TriMet bus and MAX lines are somewhat impacted. The most significant, they've already been happening downtown. Downtown MAX and bus routes, anything that goes through the heart of downtown is disrupted. And also right now, anyone trying to get to the airport on the MAX Red Line, either now or tomorrow during the president's departure, you can expect major delays on that. So I wanted to give you the early heads up on that. There's way too many impacts to mention here, so if TriMet is part of your plan, check trimet.org for all of that. Traffic, I can tell you, for the rest of the area is actually looking okay for a Friday evening, guys.
Maybe most people got the memo to stay off the roads.
Yep.
You know, one good thing, though, for us and for the president is his trip from Portland Airport to Southeast Portland will be a lot quicker than most of our trips.
And you're seeing Catherine Cook here downtown. Catherine, just stand by for 1 second there for us, because we just got some clarity over what happened when the president came down the stairs from Air Force One. You know, he was carrying what looked like a shopping bag there. So it turns out he took a cupcake out of the bag, that's what we couldn't see, and gave it to Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici because it is her birthday.
Oh,
that's according to the White House. So that was the gesture there. You know, and Len Bergstein, our political analyst, says this is what the president is good at, not giving, you know, those big speeches per se, but really his humanity, ability to connect one-on-one with folks on the ground, right? And, you know, speaking of connecting with folks downtown, that's where we believe the president's going to be staying tonight, because that's where the fences have gone up, and that is where we find Catherine Cook.
Catherine Cook without a cupcake, but it's still okay. It's a beautiful evening out here, guys. We're on Southwest 6th and Yamhill, one of several closure points that are affecting downtown Portland right now. You can see behind us where MAX lines should be running. They are closed. This whole section is closed to not only automobile traffic, but foot, bicycle, and transit traffic, as you heard Chris McGinnis describing. We've got Portland police here assisting Secret Service. We've got PBOT dump trucks here making sure that no one can get through. And I want to give you a look at this graphic we made to kind of show you the big picture of the closure downtown. Take a look here. The closures we're looking at for at least the next 24 hours are Taylor and Yamhill. Both are closed from Broadway to 4th. And 5th and 6th Avenues are also closed from Salmon to Morrison. And a Secret Service agent told me this afternoon they plan to have those closures in place until about 6 p.m. on Saturday. Now, live here in downtown Portland, you can see a small group of folks has begun to gather here at the security fence perimeter. They're very excited. They're hoping to catch even a quick glimpse of President Biden's motorcade. We don't have the exact timeline of when he's expected to come through here, but if you remember that graphic, it kind of looked like a tic-tac-toe. Right in the middle of it, the center square, if you will, is the Dunaway Hotel, and that is directly behind us here on 6th. So they may, in fact, get a glimpse of the motorcade, but it's likely that's all they will see. Back to you.
All right, Catherine Cook downtown. You're looking at I-205 southbound, which is wide open. I think this is the Halsey overpass where 84 and 205 come together. Not clear if the motorcade has passed through, but you know what? The president doesn't really wait for anybody in this case. No. I mean, I imagine it's going to be about maybe 15 minutes maximum for him to reach the SEIU building in Southeast Portland. But this is a remarkable picture too, right? Look at the gridlock headed northbound and nothing coming south.
You know, the road that's cleared looks kind of like it did during the pandemic when we would come to work. There'd be nobody on the roads, and that was always kind of nice. It'd be fun to be able to drive on an empty road like that. If you've been following the president's travel this week, he was in Southern California since Wednesday for a pair of appearances and a Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee fundraiser. And before that, he was in Colorado. Did you want to jump in?
Just as we see a police motorcycle, that's usually somebody who's 2 or 3 blocks ahead of the motorcade, I believe.
So we should be seeing it soon. He was in Colorado where he visited Camp Hale, which is a former World War II era Army training camp, and Biden named it the newest national monument. That was in Colorado, and we can see I think we see the motorcade coming.
And by the way, we've been talking sort of about, the chagrin you would have if you're a motorist trying to go south, and now you've got to wait. But at the same time, this is the most powerful man in the world.
And it doesn't happen very often.
No, and you wouldn't want any problems in any sort of fashion. So we understand. We're just making note of it so that everybody knows what's going on.
And the president, when he's here, is going to give a speech on inflation and lowering costs for American families. He also gave a similar speech in Orange County, and he talked about it on CNN. And he said then on CNN he didn't think that there would be a recession. And if there is one, it would be a very slight one. Now, that was before that latest inflation report that you mentioned, David, came out on Wednesday that showed inflation worse than expected. The consumer price index, which the core consumer price index, which excludes food and energy, increased 6.6% from a year ago. And that really puts pressure on the feds to raise interest rates again next month.
And if you're just joining us, David Mulco here along with Pat Doris and Laurel Porter. You're watching special coverage of the president's visit to Portland. That's a picture of I-205 southbound near Halsey on the east side. The president is on the ground. This is the motorcade as it makes its way to Southeast Portland, to an event where he's going to participate in a grassroots volunteer event with Democrats. Tina Kotek there, got candidate for governor. Let's bring in Chris McGinnis, who's watching the traffic impacts to kind of give us a sense of the lay of the land here.
And here's the moment where we know that he is not going to take I-84 westbound, right? They're headed south on I-205, and you can see that they continue there. Now pass out of our camera shot. Maybe we can swing that around to the south. I'm not sure if we can, but in any event, once the motorcade passes, they will let the remainder of traffic trickle across the Glenn Jackson Bridge past Airport Way and continue on their way. And I think what we're looking at here is the very back of the motorcade now. So just like that, the freeway clears, the president passes, he's likely headed down towards Powell Boulevard, and we'll then continue that westward track into inner Southeast Portland. And just like that, you can see southbound I-205 now, at least from this vantage point near the I-84 interchange, has reopened.
And he's on his way to SEIU in Southeast Portland. And we're going to check in with Kylie Boshi, who's standing by for his arrival. Kyle?
Well, and just continue that traffic roundup, I can tell you that eastbound Powell has been shut down as they await the motorcade. In all likelihood, the president will come westbound on Powell and then turn here to SEIU 49, the Union Hall, where roughly 100 supporters and union members, union leaders are gathered inside for what's being called a grassroots volunteer event with Oregon Democrats. What that means, we're not quite sure. It could be maybe phone banking, getting out on the phone and calling supporters or potential voters, maybe just rallying the troops and getting a lot of support behind Tina Kotek. As you know, SEIU is a powerful labor union here in the state of Oregon, the largest, and also has put an unprecedented amount of money behind Kotek's campaign. We've seen throughout the day Secret Service here, along with police, awaiting the president's arrival. We saw folks lined up starting at about 3 or 4 o'clock today to get inside. Now, since then, they've been inside, and it is relatively quiet out here. I can tell you, Powell Park, where we're standing right now, is quiet. The surrounding streets seem to be quiet, and not a lot of people waiting. Oftentimes, during a motorcade, we'll see people out to welcome the president or sometimes protest, but we're just not seeing that. Keep in mind, this was not disclosed publicly where this event tonight would be held, and it is a private event. So that being said, a lot of people didn't know. In fact, we've had some neighbors walk up to us and ask, what exactly is going on here? So we've had to explain that the president is in town and headed this way. They obviously are quite excited by that, but we do anticipate the motorcade getting here shortly. Again, that eastbound traffic on Powell is at a standstill, and I can see in the distance headlights backed up. So they're waiting patiently, no horns honking. The westbound traffic is moving along, and in all likelihood, we anticipate that motorcade to be coming in on westbound Powell.
All right, thank you, Kyle. And imagine what it's going to be like for those 100 people that are in a room with the President of the United States. I mean, it doesn't matter what party you're part of. This is the superstar head of your party in the nation, and you get him one-on-one. You know, when he was here in, I think it was 2015 for Merkley, I covered a speech that he gave. I believe it was at the convention center. It was super small, and he was spectacular, just as an orator, the way that he could reach out and touch people. And sometimes I think, you know, when he's doing that 3 or 4 times a day, it doesn't come across quite as well. But I'll bet those folks tonight are going to have a very special time.
And he was also here as vice president in 2017 and spoke to a packed house at the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall about his memoir about his son Beau and his battle with brain cancer and how that impacted him as vice president, as a father, and his mission and his outlook and perspective on life. And it was around the time they were going to do the moonshot to try to cure cancer. And I was told that he was, same as you just said, an incredible orator.
Yeah, the man has skills. There's no doubt about that.
I mean, and it's, you know, it's that connection, that human connection that, you know, I've been mentioning. I remember back, this was before the president was the president, when he was Senator Joe Biden, and I was on a train from New York to Washington, D.C. to visit a friend. I was either in college or just post-college. And, you know, then Senator Joe Biden had this reputation of riding the train from Wilmington to Washington almost every day to do his job and then headed home at the end of the day. And I remember he got on the same train car and he walked down and he smiled and he said good morning to everybody that was sitting there, myself included, then Senator Joe Biden. And so when you hear folks like our political analyst Len Bergstein say this is about his humanity, this is about him connecting, this is what he does. And I will add to that, maybe some of that is what sways that undecided voter or that Betsy Johnson voter to Tina Kotek. Then there he is, by the way, coming down with the bag in his hand.
There he has that bag.
With the cupcake, that personal touch, again, for Congresswoman Bonamici and her birthday.
And we saw him sign some papers, but the press pool folks say they couldn't zoom in tight enough for us to see exactly what he was writing.
And just, you know, as we talk about sort of the bigger picture context here and the president and how you feel about the Democratic Party and how you feel about the president's policies, how you feel about former President Donald Trump, just to kind of provide some context here, when you look at the country as a whole, I mentioned the president's approval ratings are actually up for a 3rd straight month since July. But when you look at, is the country as a whole moving in the right direction? So this is an NPR Marist poll from last Thursday. 52% of Democrats say yes, the country's headed in the right direction. If you look at the flip side, though, 91% of Republicans say we're headed in the wrong direction. 71% of independents say the country is headed into the wrong direction, which, you know, arguably does not bode well 3.5 weeks out of midterms.
Yeah, because no matter how popular the president is one-on-one, you have that against the backdrop of Portland and the greater metro area, and the viewers who tell us every single night they are sick and tired of the way things are going. Homelessness and crime are the big 2 issues. Even though inflation and abortion is out there, the things that are really affecting people's everyday lives are those, and you start to hear them say, I'm a liberal, I'm a progressive, but maybe not for this election.
Well, let's, I don't know if our producer Brandon can bring up that tweet from Christine Drazen, but she's really capitalizing on what you just said, Pat, as she tweeted about that, saying Oregonians are tired of status quo politicians like Tina Kotek and Kate Brown, and who've made life worse for families across the state. Bringing in a failed president isn't going to save a failing candidate. And she talks about a new direction begins on November 8th. And that is what she's hoping will buoy her, what people, their dissatisfaction with inflation and what they see as the direction in the country.
And unaffiliated Betsy Johnson, who analysts say is pulling more votes from Democrat Tina Kotek than Republican Christine Drazan, put out a video. Let's take a look.
It's coming.
President Biden, welcome to the Rose City and to Oregon. I hope you come often because every time you do, Tina's tent cities get cleaned up a little bit more. While you're here, could you please have a chat with Tina and other local officials, especially our Multnomah County DA, Mike Schmidt, about prosecuting people that are breaking the law and actually holding criminals accountable? Oregonians should feel safe in their homes. As I've said many times, Oregon cannot succeed if Portland fails. As governor, every Portlander and every Oregonian will know that they have a fighter and a governor on their side.
Well, I mean, Betsy Johnson and Christine Drazan can't bring in the current president to campaign on their behalf, so this is what they're doing. And you're looking at live pictures from Southeast Powell, what we imagine is part of the motorcade there as it makes its way towards 26th and Powell for this event with Democratic volunteers. Also, gubernatorial candidate, always have trouble with that word, right? Such a big one. Tina Kotek will be there as well, which again is the entire point of the president's visit here.
And Tina Kotek telling some news outlets, this really is a wake-up call. It wakes up citizens that there's an election coming, if you haven't noticed from all of the ads, wall-to-wall ads that you're seeing. But an election is coming, and that may be good for Democrats, may be good for Republicans, that everybody's energized. Hopefully that it motivates people to vote, and the ballots are coming out next week.
And I'm curious for both of you, Laurel and Pat, as we watch these pictures from Southeast Portland, because you've covered so many races and so many elections in Oregon. And, political analyst, strategist Rebecca Tweed mentioned to me, there have been close governor races in the past, but this one feels different. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on
Well, you've got the three candidates. That makes a big difference with Betsy Johnson pulling from both candidates. I think, Greg Walden was quoted in a news article just saying if the Republicans had two Republicans running, that would pull from the Republican.
And we have in years past. There's often been two Republicans and they can't get their act together and have just one, and so they lose terribly. I'd say the one thing that I sense that's different this year is the mood of the population. Tina Kotek has the unions behind her, and it's a bad bet to bet against the support of the unions. They get their voters out, and they are very disciplined and organized and efficient and effective. They do great grassroots campaigns, but this year I'm not sure that's going to be enough. I'm not betting against them, but it's going to be real interesting.
And one of the factors could also be Kate Brown and her unfavorable ratings, one of the lowest ratings in the country for a governor. And so the other candidates that are opposing Tina Kotek are trying to make the most of that, trying to lump Tina Kotek as part two of Kate Brown.
All right, let's bring Kyle Eboshi back in Southeast Portland. Kyle, the president on his way to you. What are you seeing and hearing right now?
Well, we've seen a few police cars coming through here. As you can see there in the distance, that's Cleveland High School. You can also see traffic in both directions on Powell shut down as we await the motorcade. We've heard some sirens in the distance, but not sure if indeed that's the motorcade heading our way. The president and that motorcade will be heading here to SEIU 49, the Union Hall, for what's described as a grassroots volunteer event with Oregon Democrats. About 100 people in all are inside the SEIU 49 Hall, many of them union members, union leaders. Also, Democratic gubernatorial candidate Tina Kotek is inside. Now you can see in the distance there some Portland police motorcycle officers. And this typically, what happens, if you've seen motorcades before, is they'll stop at cross traffic, allowing for the motorcade to continue on. And as we watch and see, we see a few more of these traffic officers from Portland Police helping to escort the president and the motorcade. And a few more of them would suggest he should be here momentarily.
I think you're right, Kyle.
Well, Kyle, we got some information about a police shooting downtown, not terribly far from where the president is supposed to be staying, downtown at Southwest and Jefferson and 12th Street. We don't have any more details than that. We're working on that and should be able to get you more details. This is a live shot of the area where this incident happened.
So this just very recently happened.
So Southwest 12th and Jefferson, not very far from KGW Studios as well, just across the 405 there on that part of downtown. Obviously it's concerning, but this is the reality we are all living through in Portland. You know, this doesn't stop just because the president is in town, as we are on par to match or exceed last year's record homicide rate in Portland. Again, we don't know the details of the shooting, if anybody's been injured or anyone's been killed, but I believe you folks said it was a police-involved shooting in some way, shape, or form here.
Correct.
That's what we're being told, and waiting for a press release to get more information. But again, the president is in a motorcade on his way to Southeast Portland, not anywhere near this scene right now.
But, you know, it just provides that kind of backdrop that all this is of everything that's going on here with the governor's race, with the race for city council in Portland, with county commissioner, with all of this that is at stake in these congressional races. And it's not just a Portland problem when we talk about crime or violence, or when we talk about the homicide rate or homelessness or behavioral health. I mean, this is the backdrop to a visit by the commander-in-chief, and there may be a lot of glad handing and smiles and moments and bringing in the cash so that Tina Kotek and other candidates can run more ads. And this is the most expensive, as you both well know, governor's race in Oregon history.
That's right.
But this is all about the lives of ordinary Oregonians. That's what elections are about, right? People choosing what they believe is the best path forward for them, campaigns aside.
And what's going to make their family safest in the city that we love. We're on a track to have a record number of murders and a record number of shootings, and to have one happen that involves a police officer as the president's here, well, it just speaks volumes about what's going on.
And we'll keep monitoring this situation as we bring Kylie Boshi in now from Southeast Portland, where the president is expected to arrive any moment at SEIU's headquarters. Kyle?
And in fact, while you were away, the president did arrive. We saw the presidential limousine, informally known as the Beast, arrive here at SEIU 49 Union Hall, along with a number of white vans for the traveling press and others associated with the White House. We didn't see the president get out of the limousine. They've set up a tent behind this building, obviously for security reasons, and he'll go inside and meet with, I would guess, roughly maybe 100 supporters and also union members that gathered here at SEIU 49 headquarters for what the White House is calling this grassroots volunteer event with Oregon Democrats. Among those in the crowd is Democratic gubernatorial candidate Tina Kotek. I saw her arrive. It was probably about 4:30, 5 o'clock. She went inside, and now the president obviously is inside the building. It's not clear exactly how long the president will be here. We don't have an official itinerary, and frankly, this location was not publicly disclosed prior to this evening's event, but we do know he will be meeting with a number of union members and others here for some time, doing some type of campaigning or at least rallying supporters, and then heading off to a hotel in downtown Portland this evening. He will overnight here in Portland, but you can see some of the many vehicles here. We've obviously got a significant police presence surrounding the building, along with Secret Service here on hand. They've been here all day long to ensure the fact that this is a secure building and perimeter as well. In fact, we're being kept across the street. There are barricades set up around Powell Park to ensure that everybody keeps a safe distance away.
And Kyle, we should mention too the event inside. We are going to get images out of that eventually and some video. It's out of town pool event, so I think NBC is the pool this week, which means there's only one camera in there, and we will get those. I imagine it looks very black and kind of bleak outside in the neighborhood there, but you can imagine there's a lot of red, white, and blue cheering, maybe even some balloons in there, and you know, the president seeing Tina Kotek for the first time, the whole reason he is here as well.
And Kyle's going to have more on that coming up tonight at 11 on KGW News. And of course, we'll have more on this shooting incident we're just learning about at Southwest Jefferson and 12th involving a police officer. Tomorrow, the president attending a reception with Tina Kotek to try to shore up her race for governor, and also giving a speech on reducing the inflation costs.
Yeah, I should mention too, she was offering up 10 photos with the president for you and a guest for $10,000 each. I checked the website again. It looks like they sold out of those $10,000 photo ops. $6,000 if you wanted to do it solo, but there are still tickets for that event. $500 if you want to join Tina Kotek and the president tomorrow. And you see the schedule there. He will be on the ground less than 24 hours there, where you see Air Force One wheels up for Delaware for the weekend about 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. But a lot's going to happen between now and then. It's certainly a longer visit than the 4 hours we had back in April.
Such a pivotal time, too, as we were talking about that ballots drop next week. And also we have the last governor's debate that we will be having here with Betsy Johnson, Tina Kotek, and Christine Drazen here on KGW at 7 o'clock on Wednesday. And I wanted to talk a little bit, if I can pitch Straight Talk, because that's coming up next.
That's a big race.
We've been talking about the competitive congressional races. We have the really competitive one in the 5th. The one we're looking at tonight is the 6th congressional district between Republican Mike Erickson and the Democrat Andrea Salinas, which is a brand new district. Now we'll have a 6th member going to Congress.
And also
who will it
a
be?
toss-up, according to the Cook Political Report, a toss-up race just like the 5th and the 6th. So, I mean, these are neck-and-neck races, which makes this time so exciting, right? The next 3.5 weeks.
So be sure to vote. They're going to talk tonight on Straight Talk about inflation. They're going to talk about crime, why they think they're the best candidate. We're talking about Erickson and Salinas. Also, there's a really controversial ad that was running that Pat will talk about next week, but involving a DUI with Erickson. He talks about that, and so does Salinas. That's coming up on Straight Talk.
All right, Straight Talk next. Complete coverage of the president's visit coming up on KGW News at 11. If we do not see you then, have a great weekend.